Good morning, everyone. October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, a time when we unite as a community to reflect, to act, and to recommit ourselves to ending domestic violence in all of its forms. Domestic abuse is an issue that transcends gender, age, and background. It occurs behind closed doors, across neighborhoods, and sometimes tragically in public. It affects families, friendships, workplaces, and most painfully, it affects our children. Imagine a child awoken from their sleep at night to hear fighting and screaming, not knowing whether their parent will make it out of the fight dead or alive. Imagine a child shouting, "Stop it, you're hurting my mom," or "Stop it, you're hurting my dad." Their request is what they want. They just want it to all go away. They want it all to stop. Why? Because it really does hurt. When hurtful behavior cannot be controlled or calmed, it teaches children and people how to act and how to behave. And this is the vicious cycle of destruction. We do know behavior of domestic abuse can be changed, can be reversed, and can be stopped. This is the impact we want. This is a story of recovery we want for our community. We must ensure that no child grows up believing that this is the normal cycle. Since 2021, the Ministry of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors has prioritized supporting victims and survivors through meaningful action. For 2025-26 financial year, the Ministry of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors has allocated $150,000 for the Center Against Abuse and $75,000 for Home to Support the Transformational Living Center program for mothers and children, previously provided through the Women's Resource Center, providing essential services to those impacted by domestic abuse. These funds have helped to ensure that assistance is available when and where it is needed the most. We also recognize the need for immediate financial relief for victims escaping abusive situations. Through the Department of Financial Assistance, the Short-Term Relief Benefit Act of 2024 was legislated to provide temporary support to individuals and families to secure safety and stability while longer-term solutions are arranged. Although this allowance is being reviewed for improvement, it continues to play a vital role in helping domestic abuse survivors rebuild their lives. But our work does not stop at responding to harm after it occurs. We must also focus on prevention and rehabilitation. That is why the ministry has committed the introduction of the Domestic Abuse Perpetrator Services, designed to provide intervention and treatment to individuals who have used violence or control within intimate relationships. In 2022, Safe Lives UK, a charity dedicated to ending domestic abuse, conducted a comprehensive review of Bermuda's domestic abuse landscape using a public health approach. Their findings made it clear to truly break the cycle of violence, our response must address not only the needs of the victim, but also the behaviors of perpetrators. Following those recommendations, we issued a request for information last year, and through the collaborative work of the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference, or MOROC, 2 service providers, Area Solutions and MASK, were selected to participate in delivering these vital programs. The new initiative will launch in autumn of 2025. We will begin with Area Solutions offering its Abusive Perpetrator Evolving to Change program. This 26-week intervention combines education, accountability, and behavioral therapy to promote real, sustained change. By addressing the root causes of abusive behavior, we can foster rehabilitation, support families, and ultimately create safer homes and communities. The ministry has allocated $200,000 for the first year of implementation, ensuring that these services are accessible, monitored, and evaluated through a clear performance indicators. This investment represents not only a financial commitment, but also a moral one to hold offenders accountable while offering them a pathway towards change. Alongside these developments, the Morocco Committee has worked diligently to frame Bermuda's 5-year domestic abuse strategic plan. This plan, grounded in the recommendations from Safe Lives, represents a truly national effort involving government agencies, community organizations, and advocacy partners such as the Center Against Abuse, the Women's Resource Center, and One Love. The plan is structured around 6 priorities: multi-agency collaboration and governance, risk assessment and early intervention, support services for survivors, accountability and rehabilitation for perpetrators, awareness, education, and community engagement, data collection, and monitoring. In the coming weeks, we will share a draft strategic plan through the Government Citizens Forum website for consultation. We encourage members of the public and stakeholders alike to share their perspectives, ensuring the plan reflects the needs and the voices of its citizens of Bermuda. From the beginning, our approach has been guided by collaboration between ministries, agencies, and community partners. Domestic abuse is not a single department issue. It is a whole of a society challenge that demands shared responsibility and coordinated action. As we mark Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, I wish to acknowledge the courage of survivors, the dedication of service providers, and the commitment of our partners. Together, we are building a system that not only responds to violence, but works to prevent it, one that fosters healing, accountability, and hope. Let us continue to stand, to speak out, to support, and to strengthen the fabric of our community until domestic abuse has no place in Bermuda. Now, I'd like to welcome our Attorney General, the Minister of Justice, Senator the Honorable Kim Wilkerson, to make remarks.
Thank you, Minister Furbert, and good. Thank you, Minister Furbert, and good morning, everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging how important it is that we come together publicly to talk about domestic abuse. This is not an easy subject. It is deeply personal, and for far too many people, it is a painful reality that they are living with right now. But that is exactly why we must continue to bring it into the open. This month, which is coming to a close, has given us an opportunity to shine a light on an issue that I believe, quite frankly, has lived in the shadows for too long. We are here not only to raise awareness, but to show that this government is taking deliberate, practical steps to strengthen how Bermuda responds to domestic abuse. For me, this issue goes well beyond my role as Attorney General. Yes, my ministry is responsible for legislation and justice policy, but I also know the human cost of domestic abuse, as it is felt long before anyone enters a courtroom. It affects children, families, entire communities. Our response must be both compassionate and coordinated and informed by those who experience it. Earlier this year, we took an important step in that direction with the creation of the Domestic Abuse Reform Steering Committee, or DARSC, a robust cross-ministry, cross-department initiative. Let me make it clear that this is not just another government committee. Rather, it is a group of senior people from across the justice system, social services, the Bermuda Police, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, financial assistance, the Department of Child and Family Services, and other agencies who are working together with one clear purpose: to strengthen how Bermuda prevents, responds to, and ultimately reduces domestic abuse. This committee has been structured around two working groups. One, looking closely at the legal and procedural side, and the other focused on social services, housing, health, and community education. That combination matters. It means we're not only looking at how the system responds after harm is done, but how we can make it easier for victims to access help and for families to rebuild their lives. Some of the key areas already focused on include developing new legislative proposals, including potential changes to the criminal code and the creation of a Domestic Abuse Act, as well as changes to financial assistance regulations, which my colleague has just spoken about, to close the gap where victim survivors are left without resources. These committees are looking at how we can strengthen protection for victims and witnesses, and how domestic abuse cases are handled in family court, especially when children are involved. They are also working to improve coordination between agencies so that when someone comes forward for help, they are not left to navigate the system on their own. We also want to expand treatment programs for offenders, which my colleague has also just talked about, and I'm happy to report that those perpetrator services will also be initiated inside the walls of Westgate. Because responding effectively is not just about laws. It is also about people, about building trust, and ensuring that when victims do seek help, they are met with understanding and action. This work is closely connected to the 5-year Domestic Abuse Strategic Plan Minister Furbert just spoke about. The research behind the strategic plan established the necessity for this committee. It is intended to reduce silos so that we can get every single government resource on the same page at the same time to ensure a continuum of care, from support through legal proceedings to health care, from financial assistance to housing support. Domestic abuse is a complex cultural issue within Bermuda. Far too many families are affected, and as we confront the problems of national violence, we must understand that domestic abuse is one root cause. Addressing the origins and providing support means we are not only helping a family in immediate crisis, but we are preventing further harm being inflicted on our community in the future. I want to acknowledge the dedication of our community partners, including the Women's Resource Center and the Center Against Abuse, who have long been on the front lines of this issue. Their input and their place at the table has been critical in shaping our continued partnership and will be essential for going forward. We are also making progress on establishing, as I have talked about already, the dedicated domestic violence court program. This is an important development that will ensure that these cases are handled more sensitively and more efficiently, and that victims receive timely support, and fast-track trials. All of this matters because behind every statistic, behind every policy, and behind every piece of legislation are real people. There are men and women who've endured harm and children who have witnessed it. There are families trying to rebuild from the ashes of immediate generational harm. This is why I am so personally invested in this issue. Domestic abuse is not something we can accept as inevitable. It is something we must confront together with urgency and purpose. As we've already stated, October is Domestic Awareness Month. That month is coming to a close, but our work will not end when the month ends. So this is a long-term commitment. We will take sustained effort from government, from community partners, and from the public. And if we do this well, we will help to create a safer, more supportive Bermuda for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General, and thank you, Minister Furbert, for your joint briefing. At this time, we'll start with Minister Wilkerson. We'll invite media questions, starting with the Royal Gazette. Any questions for the AG? And then we'll switch to Minister Furbert.
Good morning, Minister.
Good morning.
Thank you for the update. It was good to hear at least some information about Domestic Violence Act, and you spoke there about the importance of urgency and purpose, and I believe that this act is perhaps believed in the community by some as long overdue. What work has been done and what are the timelines for this to be implemented and enacted in Bermuda?
Thank you, Sarah. And let me just say, I agree. I think that many members of our community have said legislation is a long time coming. But I think there's two important things. One is that the creation of a Domestic Abuse Act is a small part of addressing this problem. And I think we're talking about the cultural changes that have to be made in this community, how people think about domestic violence. As I've said, that they don't assume that it's inevitable, that this is just something that happens, that we start to create a culture where we're caring about this issue and we're addressing it in a more systemic way. So timing, it is on my charge sheet for the first quarter of the new session. So we believe it's by summer of next year that legislation will be in place.
In place, okay.
Yes.
Can you speak to the purpose of this act? What really is it aiming to achieve that we don't have already under current law?
Thank you. There are a number of things that currently, the way that we're dealing with domestic violence, we under the criminal code. So this will be an opportunity to take things that affect victims of this type of abuse specifically and put them in a single act that can be referenced. So we're looking at now, Sarah, things like strangulation, right? We know that if there are incident reports of strangulation, right, the chances of that resulting in something far more serious and even potentially deadly in a later incident are things that we know statistically are likely to be sounders. So strangulation is one of those things. The other, currently, we're not treating children who witness domestic violence as the victims themselves. That is one of the changes. So I don't want to get in front of ourselves in terms of consultation, because we are still doing some consultation on what that act will look like, and a broader consultation. So we've, as I've already said, we've had sit-downs with our major partners, with the Center Against Abuse, with the Women's Resource Center, certainly with and within DARSC, which is what that committee's work will be doing. So we will be able to report more on what that looks like when drafts go out for consultation.
Okay, thank you. And is there any information or update you can give me in terms of a safe house or safe houses that might be in the works of being created?
I think I'll leave that for Minister Furbert. She'll be able to answer the question on safe
Okay,
housing.
just one more question
Yes.
then before we swap. You mentioned that the relief fund was being reviewed. Can you just elaborate? What is it going to remain in place? Is it going to go up, down, or what kind of review are you doing of that?
That is also for Minister Furbert.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
But I would say we recognize that this is so important that there will be no time for a relief fund to go away.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, well, any elaboration on what you're reviewing would be great.
Thank you, Sarah. I have a question from Bermuda Broadcasting Company.
Good morning, Senator Wilkerson. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Jasmine. Thank
Morning.
you.
Just wanted to get back to the changes around this specific Domestic Violence Act. Speaking with advocates in the community, they've long talked about coercive control, which may look like financial manipulation, humiliation, things that may not outright look like domestic violence, but ultimately fall under this category and can be more lethal in certain situations. Is the ministry looking to bring Bermuda's legislation in line with UK, US, Australia, and Canada's codes when it comes to that sort of abuse?
On the question of coercive control specifically, absolutely yes.
Okay. And so you'll be consulting with how to bring Bermuda in line with international standards?
Well, I think it's a bit of a misnomer to suggest international standards. I think what we do in Bermuda has to be culturally relevant. It must track in accordance with our own data, our own incident reporting, but it is always useful to be able to look to other jurisdictions and to see how it's worked and also how it hasn't worked.
Okay. When it comes to the number of domestic violence cases before the court, do you have a general estimate of how that varies, what that number is currently?
I don't have that number. I don't have that number at hand, but we can get that information.
No problem. Thank you. Another concern that also tends to come up when talking about domestic violence is victims may be coerced or may voluntarily withdraw their statements. Is there any further protections that can be done to, legally, encourage victims to keep their statements? And I just wondered what your thought was on that process.
Absolutely. We recognize that domestic abuse is a particular situation where a victim may not want to proceed with a prosecution, and also they may not want to testify. And so that is absolutely what is being looked at in the framing out of the new pieces of legislation. That matters can proceed without a victim.
Mm-hmm. I just wondered if you could identify for us what are the cultural roadblocks that are preventing us from addressing domestic violence in this community?
I might punt that one to Minister Furbert, but because I think it is a cultural thing. I was at the Department of Culture storytelling session, haunted ghost stories over the weekend, and there's a beautiful telling of the story of Anna Skeeters, and people would know that that was a case where the whole of the Somerset community, back in 1864 or something, knew that this woman was being domestically abused. People heard the fights going on at her home. And it was only after she'd been murdered, or after she'd gone missing and there was a search for her body, that people begin to talk about the fact that something untoward is going on in that house next door. So that's the kind of thing, people are looking to the legislature, right, to make changes. We can make legislative changes, but that kind of cultural change has to happen with people. And members of our community have to say, what can I do in the place where I am, where I sit, to shine a light, to raise my hand when I see something happening? It's for the teachers in a classroom. If a 5-year-old is coming to school and they're sleeping all day, maybe something unsafe is going on in that home. Can that teacher ask a question, right? So do we treat it more sensitively? Yeah? So I think that in all those ways, our society can be better if people would really take up the mantle and just be a minder. I think for years and years and generations, these matters have been swept under the carpet, and it's just, that goes on in that house and it's not our business. It has to be everybody's business. And the reason it's everybody's business is because when children who witness that kind of trauma grow up, something else happens, and it doesn't just stay in one household. It's an issue for all of us.
I got that reference because I read that story in the Bermudian. Thank you for mentioning it. Just lastly, when it comes to, you mentioned screening, being able to identify abuse or any sorts of signs of it, will there be a push to mandate that sort of training with school teachers, with court officials, with, those in the public sphere that are interacting with the community?
So part of the work that DARSC is doing right now is ensuring that training happens for all of the people, at least in the governmental agencies. So, and we've heard it, people will say, please come out to a call, and maybe the response is not as sensitive as it could be. Maybe there's something that they didn't recognize, that they've overlooked. And I've had the police commissioner at my table, and we're talking about these things. The instances, for example, of cruelty against animals going up. We know that there's a direct correlation between that type of thing and, serious instances of domestic violence. So looking at all of that. So short answer is yes, training across all governmental agencies where people are in touch with potential victims.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, AG, for your presentation. And we'll now invite Minister Furbert to take a few questions, starting with... Royal Gazette.
Thanks, Ty.
What was my question?
It was in regards to the safe housing was one.
Yeah, I did ask about safe housing. Any update you could give on that, please?
Sure. So the Ministry of Youth, Social Development and Seniors works very closely with the Center Against Abuse, who does provide safe housing options. What we find is that safe housing more recently and years in the past is used less frequently because most clients are opting to remain in their homes with the use of a domestic violence protection order. But for those persons who do require safe housing, we do have, through Center Against Abuse, we have rental properties in which someone who requires that particular service can be housed in a home in the community, rental property in the community until they are able to return to a safer option for them.
Is there anything specific for children? I don't know if they need to be removed from a household.
So the Bermuda Police Service, again, is an agency who we work closely with. There is a case of domestic abuse that has been flagged on one of their calls, that they do share that information with the Department of Child and Family Services, in which the Department of Child and Family Services will do an investigation and also will offer counseling services for children as well as their parents.
Okay, great. And then the other question I'd asked is about the relief fund, and that it's being
Yes.
reviewed. Can you just say what that review's about?
Yes, so we would know that this year, the end of last year, this year was the first time that we introduced a short-term relief benefit as it relates to domestic abuse. We have to, what we're currently looking at is making the application process a little bit more streamlined because we're noticing that applications that come in are incomplete. We are also, the feedback that we are getting is the types of documentation that is required for verification. We're having discussions around what that looks like. And we are also, there needs to be an understanding of the cycle of abuse, meaning there are times when persons will return back to that same situation. It doesn't mean that, that person deserves to be abused again. But we do understand, and getting our, people who work with persons who are experiencing domestic abuse to understand that those occurrences can sometimes happen. And also the time frame that it takes for someone, particularly when they have young children and they need assistance with the finances, looking at the time period in which they're able to receive those funds.
And I might have missed this, but we were talking about training from Jasmine's question, and you were talking about government agencies. You're including teachers, school teachers, that sort of thing, to identify in the classroom and school environment?
Yes, so the Center Against Abuse, again, an agency, as well as the Department of Child and Family Services, do offer training opportunities in the community. I know they have worked really hard to work with the Bermuda Police Services around sensitivity training, but those training opportunities are available for our educators as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Here's Bermuda Broadcasting.
Good morning, Minister. Thanks for your statement. Just staying with the financial assistance short-term funds, I wonder if you're able to explain the process for us. Does one need to show proof that they are victims, or are they referred from another service? How does that work?
Yeah, so there is an application process. There's an application for the short-term relief benefit, which someone would have to fill out the forms. They would also have to indicate for the area in which they are looking to have support from that particular legislation. There is verification documentation such as police reports. Also working with any agencies such as the Women's Resource Center or the Center Against Abuse. So those are sort of verifying documentations that someone would have to provide, to share their experience as it relates to domestic abuse.
And are they supported through that application process? It sounds like it could be quite stressful.
Yeah, so the Center Against Abuse, and I'm sure the Women's Resource Center provides support with that process. So, what I want persons who may have to utilize that particular service to not think that they are out there alone. And I know it can be very challenging because people like to keep things to themselves, but that those services are available to support them through those processes of the short-term relief benefit.
Just to get a sense of the gravity of the situation, are you able to share how many people have benefited from this service and or how much has been paid out specifically?
We're actually working on the annual report as it relates to the short-term relief benefit. So I have not shared that information yet with my cabinet colleagues, so I prefer to hold off on sharing that information publicly. But there is an annual report that is that will be done every year as it relates to the short-term relief benefit.
Understood. Are you able to say, going back to the domestic abuse perpetrator services, that's in the works, did you mention?
That is in the works. We are at a place where we will be accepting referrals for that particular program, which could come by way of the Department of Child and Family Services, by Aging and Disability Services, by really anyone in the community who wants to access that particular service, but also court orders as well.
Yeah, that would be my next question. You know, would it be compulsory for those accused or convicted of this kind of behavior? I just wondered, you know, how is it being enforced?
So yes, it can be an order through the court, which would be a level of enforcement, but also I spoke about key indicators earlier in my statement, where we will be actually tracking the completion rates, as well as change in behavior, as well as reoffending rates, self-reporting, and individual assessments of improvements.
Yes, I think just generally, you know, are you seeing, you know, since we've had the mark, you know, referrals, assessments been done overseas with Save Lives UK, are you seeing any marked changes in reference to the attitudes towards domestic violence and how the community's responding to it, and perhaps how victims are responding to it? Are you seeing more people willing to take action to help themselves?
The awareness piece, the awareness and education piece is a vital piece to this particular issue that we see. You know, you'll see videos going around in the community with people fighting, right? That is, you know, that is a type of violence. It is a type of physical violence. And then people also get confused that maybe words, or you talk about coercive behaviors, are not as harmful as physical behaviors. And it usually starts with emotional or coercive words that then goes into physical harm. And so we want our community to be aware that one is not left without the other, and we should take both of those behaviors as being very serious. And we should not tolerate one being more important over the other.
Yeah. Sorry, you just jogged my memory. Just as a follow-up, we've seen anecdotally a lot of videos of women, girls taking part in this violent action. Is this being a concern? Is the ministry doing anything to address it?
So the perpetrator program is applicable to males and females.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members of the media, and thank you again to Ministers Furbert and Wilkerson for your briefing today. And that concludes today's media conference.